At its heart, this is a story about power, prejudice, and poetic justice. The core theme is redemption through revelation, where assumptions are shattered and truths come to light in the most unexpected way. It centers around a moment that flips the script on racial bias, power imbalance, and systemic assumptions. A white police officer, comfortable in his position of authority, stops a black woman, expecting submission, but instead, he discovers a truth that upends his entire worldview. This story explores how deep-rooted prejudice can blind someone to reality, and how authority can be a mask, one that hides deeper, inconvenient truths. It challenges the reader to rethink who truly holds power in a room, and what happens when the one underestimated turns out to be the one with all the control. The story falls under the drama genre with strong elements of social justice and psychological tension. There's also an undertone of moral thriller, not with guns or violence, but with power dynamics and intellectual confrontation. The intensity comes not from action-packed chase scenes, but from the crackling energy of uncomfortable truth and shifting control. The driving emotional tone of this story is righteous satisfaction, combined with rising tension and sharp disbelief. Readers should feel suspense as the officer escalates the situation, then shock when the tables turn, and finally deep satisfaction and awe as the truth is revealed. There's also a lingering anger, a critique of injustice and assumptions that society has normalized. But above all, the emotion is empowerment. The title is intentionally provocative. It signals a reversal of expectation and stokes curiosity. How could a woman own the police department? Who is she really? The story promises justice, but not in the way one might think. It invites the audience to experience a slow-burning unraveling of control, where the one in the driver's seat isn't the man with the badge, but the woman with the truth. The flashing red and blue lights lit up her rearview mirror like a war zone. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, not out of fear, but restraint. She knew this routine all too well. A quiet sigh escaped her lips as the squad car behind her blared its siren once, sharp, commanding. She pulled over smoothly to the side of the quiet suburban road, the purr of her black Mercedes dying into silence. The world, for a moment, held its breath. The white officer stepped out of his cruiser. Heavy boots, swagger, confidence built not just from years in uniform, but from centuries of unchallenged assumptions. He adjusted his belt, glanced at her license plate, and smirked. Vanity plate, gold trim, out of town. He was already annoyed. He approached the driver's side window slowly, letting the tapping of his flashlight on her glass announce his presence like a judge with a gavel. She rolled down the window without a word. He didn't greet her, didn't ask how her day was going, just narrowed his eyes like he was scanning a suspect. License and registration. Her voice was calm. "May I ask why I was stopped, officer?" He clicked his tongue. "You were going 7 over the limit and failed to signal a lane change." She raised an eyebrow. She had changed lanes once, slowly, cautiously. But she didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, she handed him her license and registration. He glanced at the name. Dr. Nia Roberts. Didn't flinch. Didn't register it. "Doctor, huh?" he muttered. "Of what?" "Hair and nails." She looked at him, straight in the eyes. No flinch. No reaction. "Criminal justice," she said, with a concentration in systemic law enforcement reform. He let out a chuckle, dry, patronizing. "Cute. Sit tight." He walked back to his cruiser, swagger thicker now, and she stared straight ahead. Her face remained unreadable, carved from the kind of calm that came from experience. In his car, he called something in, asked for a background check, requested verification of her plate, muttered under his breath about entitled types with fancy degrees. His partner, new recruit, glanced at the screen. Sir." The officer waved him off. "It's just another big talker with a doctorate. Wait till I write her up. Probably cry racism on TikTok or something." But his partner stared at the name again, then the file, then the flag next to her ID. His eyes widened. "Sir, you might want to see." The officer didn't listen. Instead, he stepped out again, strutting toward her window with a ticket pad. She was still there, still calm. He slapped the pad once against his hand. "You people always think the rules don't apply, huh?" Her eyes finally moved, slowly, up to meet his. And then she said, evenly, "Before you finish writing that ticket, I suggest you run that badge number of yours through the internal roster." The air changed. Slightly, like a storm was looming. He laughed again, but this time it felt thinner. Excuse me. She didn't blink. You're not aware of who I am. But you should be. Because starting last month, I became the new chairwoman of the Civilian Oversight Board for your precinct. Which means, she reached into her glove box, pulled out a file, and handed it to him. I technically outrank your chief. Silence. Pure, bone-deep silence. The wind didn't even move. His partner had stepped out of the cruiser now, face pale, already checking his tablet. One glance. Then two. Then a whisper. Oh my God. The white officer looked back at her. His smirk gone. Hand trembling just slightly around the ticket pad. She offered a smile. Not smug. Not angry. Just calm. I'd love to continue this conversation. But I suggest you decide right now. Are you pulling over a citizen or your boss? Dr. Nia Roberts didn't rise to power through luck, favoritism, or family money. She earned every inch of respect carved into her name through sleepless nights, blood pressure spiking meetings, and a childhood that taught her survival before it taught her speech. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, in a neighborhood where sirens sang more often than birds, Nia grew up watching the cracks in the system from the inside out. Her father, Marcus Roberts, was a schoolteacher who spent more time breaking up fights than teaching fractions. Her mother, Lorraine, was a nurse, constantly rotating shifts between the trauma ward and the ICU. Neither parent had time to sugarcoat the truth. By age 12, Nia had already memorized what to say to a cop if she was stopped while walking home from school. By 15, she'd watched her older brother Malcolm arrested for a crime he didn't commit, only to have his name cleared after spending 3 months in county lockup. The seed of justice, planted painfully, began to grow. Nia didn't run from the system. She decided to infiltrate it. She pursued education with the intensity of a storm. High school valedictorian, full ride to Howard University, then a law degree from NYU, and finally a PhD in criminal justice with a focus on structural bias in policing. She wasn't chasing prestige. She was building weapons, intellectual, procedural, bulletproof ones. Her focus wasn't on defense. It was on transformation. Now in her mid-30s, Nia Roberts stood as the youngest woman and first black woman ever to be appointed as chair of the Civilian Oversight Board of the state's largest police department. Her job wasn't symbolic. She had the power to suspend, audit, and fire senior officers based on misconduct. Every badge in that district ultimately answered to her signature. But the power didn't change her. It sharpened her. She dressed sharply, always in clean lines and solid colors. Never flashy, but always commanding. Her voice was steady and low, designed not to shout, but to pierce. She had learned that real authority didn't need to raise its volume. It raised its standards. Despite her accolades, Nia lived simply. A 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. No driver. No entourage. She still did her own grocery shopping and still wore the scar on her left hand from breaking up a high school fight back when she taught criminal law at a community college. But even with all that strength, Nia carried a subtle ache beneath her surface. A weariness that came from being the first in too many rooms, from having to smile through clenched teeth at donors and politicians who questioned her credentials even after she outranked them. Her greatest fear wasn't losing her job. It was losing her soul to the same system she vowed to change. She kept a photo of her brother Malcolm in her wallet, taken the day he was released from county. Eyes tired, face half smiling. He never quite recovered from the trauma. He moved away, cut off ties. He said he didn't want to be a symbol for her movement. But he was. He always would be. That morning, before she was pulled over, Nia had been on her way to a quiet retreat in the mountains. A brief escape. No laptops. No news. Just trees, silence, and breath. But the system never slept. And apparently, neither did its arrogance. As she sat in the driver's seat of her Mercedes, looking at the stunned officer beside her, Nia's posture remained composed. But inside, that familiar mix of sadness and fire churned again. She didn't enjoy humiliating anyone. That wasn't her style. But she knew what it meant to be underestimated. She knew the danger of silence. She would not let this moment pass. This wasn't about ego. It was about principle. Because if she, a woman with credentials, rank, and legal armor, could still be treated like just another black woman in a fancy car, what chance did the next girl have? The one without a title, without a voice? Nia never wanted to be feared. She wanted to be remembered. And she wanted to make damn sure that next time an officer like this pulled someone over, they thought twice before assuming who they were dealing with. The silence inside the cruiser was deafening as Officer Brad Keaton stared at the ID card in his hand. His smirk from moments ago had dissolved into a pale, twitching stillness. Nia watched him from her side mirror, her face a mask carved in patience and fire. He took a shaky breath and leaned down toward her window again, this time with less swagger and more caution. Dr. Roberts, he began, fumbling over the title like it was foreign. I didn't recognize. You didn't need to recognize me, she interrupted calmly. You needed to follow protocol. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It cut like a blade. Brad looked around, as if hoping someone might come rescue him from this moment. But there was no cavalry. Just the warm, exposed sun and the slow burn of realization that this stop had just become a career-defining mistake. Nia rolled her window all the way down now. Are we still conducting a traffic stop, Officer Keaton? She asked. He swallowed. No, ma'am. You're free to go. But she didn't move. She kept her hands on the wheel, eyes straight ahead. Then you may return my license and registration, she said, the cadence of her words cold and deliberate. Keaton handed the documents back with the reverence of someone returning a relic to its rightful owner. But as she took them, she looked up. Badge number? She asked. He hesitated. Excuse me. Your badge number. I didn't catch it earlier when you were shouting. Keaton's ears turned red. Badge number 47219, he muttered. She nodded and jotted it down in her leather-bound notebook, the kind she always carried, a habit from law school days. She flipped it shut, and then she started her engine. He took a half step back from the car, as if bracing for impact. But she didn't peel off in fury. She drove off slowly, calmly, like a queen exiting a courtroom she'd just turned upside down. But this was only the beginning. By the time Nia reached her mountain cabin that afternoon, word had already begun to circulate. A text from her executive assistant popped up the moment she got service back. Call me. Urgent. Incident with patrol officer went viral. Media already sniffing. Nia sighed and set her phone down. She stared out at the tall pines outside the cabin, breathing in one slow inhale. She had wanted peace. Now she was staring down a storm. She tapped the assistant's number. Talk. Dr. Roberts. The voice came through, sharp and alert. The officer who stopped you earlier? Someone caught part of it on video. Uploaded to TikTok. It's already hit over 2 million views. They're calling it the day she checked the cop. Nia closed her eyes. And Keaton. Internal Affairs wants to speak with you. And the governor's office called. Nia's jaw tightened. Of course they did. This wasn't just about a traffic stop anymore. It had become symbolic. Because to the world watching online, this wasn't just a black woman asserting her rights. This was the woman who held power over the entire department being pulled over and disrespected by one of the men she was tasked with regulating. It wasn't personal. It was systemic. And the public had taken notice. By evening, news outlets had picked up the story. Her phone buzzed nonstop with interview requests, panel invites, and statement demands. But it wasn't until the next morning that the true shock came. A confidential memo, forwarded to her by a trusted insider in the mayor's office, landed in her inbox. The subject line read, Recommendation to suspend Chair Dr. Nia Roberts pending review. She stared at it in disbelief. They were turning the incident on her. The justification? Creating a hostile media environment. Bringing undue scrutiny upon the department. Undermining officer morale. Nia felt the breath leave her lungs. This was retaliation. Thinly veiled. Politically motivated. Strategic. She had embarrassed them. And now, they were trying to silence her. The officer who had profiled her, still on duty. The woman he humiliated, now under scrutiny. The system was reacting exactly as she had warned it would. The stakes had just risen. If she stepped back quietly, the message would be clear. Even the highest-ranking black woman in law enforcement oversight could be dragged down for speaking truth. But if she pushed back, if she went public, it would be war. And this time, it wouldn't be a TikTok soundbite. It would be a reckoning. She looked again at the memo. She noticed the timestamp, 6:42 a.m. It hadn't even been 24 hours. The machine moved fast when it felt threatened. But so did she. Nia stood up from her desk. She walked to the window and looked out over the valley. Mist rolled in waves beneath the rising sun. a symbol of what was coming. Foggy, yet unstoppable. She picked up her phone and made the call. Get the board together. Emergency session. Tonight. Her assistant's voice came through instantly. Understood. And tell the media, she added. Dr. Roberts will be speaking live tomorrow morning. This was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. Not hers, but the truth's. And she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The emergency board meeting was held behind closed doors in a nondescript municipal building downtown. But despite its secrecy, everyone knew why they were there. The atmosphere was tense, thick with whispered alliances and unspoken threats. Dr. Nia Roberts arrived precisely on time, dressed in a deep navy blue suit that said one thing: Warrior Mode activated. Her signature gold pin, shaped like a phoenix, gleamed against the lapel, a subtle signal to those who had known her long enough to recognize it. The phoenix always appeared when Nia was about to rise from attempted ruin. The board, 12 members, mostly white, mostly male, sat in awkward silence as she took her seat at the head of the polished oak table. The chairman, a gray-haired man named Douglas Beale, cleared his throat. Dr. Roberts, before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is confidential and off the record. Nia leaned forward. Then let's make sure we say something worth keeping secret. There were murmurs. A few shifted in their chairs. Douglas nodded stiffly and gestured to a stack of papers. You've read the internal memo. The concern is that your confrontation with Officer Keaton and the public attention it generated is compromising the commission's objectivity. Objectivity. Nia's voice rang with restrained power. Or comfort. More murmurs. One board member, a younger black woman named Tara, glanced at Nia with a small nod. She was outnumbered, but not alone. Nia opened her leather folder and slid a packet across the table. Let's talk facts. Officer Keaton has had 3 prior complaints of racial profiling, all swept under the rug. I didn't file this report because of my ego. I filed it because the people of this city deserve better. Douglas shifted. We're aware, Dr. Roberts. But with the media now spinning this into a racial justice crusade. It is a racial justice issue, she cut in sharply. And the only people spinning are the ones trying to protect the status quo. The room fell into a heavy silence. Someone at the far end coughed, awkwardly. Then came the moment she had prepared for. She turned to Tara. Please distribute the digital audit I conducted over the past 6 months. Unreviewed complaints, patterns of abuse, internal communication logs. You'll find Keaton's name comes up repeatedly, alongside others with similar histories. Tara nodded and began forwarding the files. This is bigger than one stop, Nia continued. This is a systemic issue that's been ignored by this board for far too long. Douglas looked visibly uneasy now. Are you accusing this commission of negligence? I'm holding it accountable, she replied. Same as I do for any department we oversee. He pressed his lips into a tight line. Dr. Roberts, are you willing to step aside temporarily while we conduct an internal review? Nia's eyes locked onto his. There was no fear, only steel. No, she said flatly. Because I know how your internal reviews work. Delay, distract, then quietly remove the voice that made too much noise. I will not let you do to me what this system has done to so many others. Tara spoke up suddenly, voice clear and unwavering. I second Dr. Roberts' stance. We should be investigating Officer Keaton, not silencing the oversight chair who exposed him. It was the first time anyone else had dared speak on Nia's behalf in this room. Nia gave a small, imperceptible nod of gratitude. The board began to fracture in that moment, hesitation and fear showing in the cracks. No vote was taken that night, but Nia had achieved what she needed. She stalled their plan, bought time, and gained a witness inside. She exited the meeting with her head high and her purpose intact, but the next morning would change everything. She was scheduled to speak live on the city's largest news network, a primetime slot that usually reserved space for mayoral debates or public health emergencies. But this time, it was for her. She stepped onto the stage, cameras flashing, reporters craning forward with bated breath. Behind her, on a massive screen, the headline read, Dr. Nia Roberts speaks, Systemic Injustice and the Future of Law Enforcement Oversight. The interviewer welcomed her. Polished, polite, nervous. Dr. Roberts, the footage of your encounter with Officer Keaton has sparked a firestorm online and across our city. Many are calling you a hero. Others believe you're politicizing a personal moment. What do you say to them? Nia faced the camera directly. This was never personal. This is about power. Who has it? Who abuses it? And who is punished for daring to challenge it? She paused. What happened to me was not unique. What is unique is that I had the position, the credentials, and the visibility to fight back. But what about those who don't? That's why I'm speaking. Not for myself, for them. The room was silent. You're calling for reforms? The reporter asked. I'm calling for transformation, Nia corrected. Review boards should have teeth, not just titles. Officers with repeated complaints should be suspended, not protected. And communities of color should not be treated as training grounds for unchecked aggression. The camera panned to her audience, silent, stunned, some nodding. This city must decide, she finished. Do we want a future where justice is earned by credentials or guaranteed by conscience? That line would be quoted for weeks. It would headline editorials, inspire protests, and shake the foundation of a complacent system. But it came with a price. That evening, Nia's tires were slashed. The next morning, someone painted "Sit down, be asterisk 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 asterisk" across her front door in red spray paint. The harassment escalated. Anonymous calls, threats. A fake scandal about her credentials circulated online, quickly debunked, but the damage lingered. But so did her resolve. For every insult, there was a message of support. For every attack, a new ally stepped forward. And then came the breakthrough. A whistleblower, a young white officer, reached out with proof that Keaton's past incidents had been purposefully buried by internal affairs. I couldn't keep quiet anymore, he said over a secure line. When I saw what they were trying to do to you, I knew I had to come forward. He handed over files, damning ones. And now, Nia had what she needed not just to defend herself, but to burn the lies to the ground. The day of reckoning arrived with a strange stillness. It was the kind of morning where the sky remained a heavy gray, neither storming nor clear, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Dr. Nia Roberts stood outside the Department of Internal Oversight, a thick file clutched in her hand. The media had been tipped off, not by her, but by someone who believed the truth needed witnesses. Cameras clicked. Reporters swarmed. But Nia didn't flinch. She walked into the building with fire in her veins and steel in her step. The whistleblower's documents were irrefutable. Keaton had at least 5 sealed complaints of racial misconduct, 2 of them involving minors. One complainant had been paid a settlement under a gag order. The others simply disappeared. Worse still, there were emails, internal communications showing a concerted effort by senior officials to protect high-performing officers from bad optics, as one message crudely put it. As Nia presented the findings in the public hearing room, the silence among the board members was no longer composed. It was cracking. She paced slowly across the floor, voice steady. I didn't come here to be believed because of my degrees, she said. I didn't come here to be heard because of my title. I came because I was targeted, and when I fought back, I was nearly erased. She paused, letting the moment hang in the air. I will not be erased. The screens behind her displayed damning slide after slide. Names, dates, redacted reports, now unsealed. Faces of victims, their stories returned to the light after years of forced silence. Douglas Beale was pale, his hands shaking. Dr. Roberts, this is highly irregular. No, Mr. Beale. This, she pointed at the documents, is highly overdue. The room erupted in quiet gasps as she pulled out one last sheet. This, she said, holding it high, is a sworn affidavit from Officer Daniel Kirsch, a fellow officer who confirms that not only was Keaton protected, but that he himself was warned not to file his own complaint or face disciplinary retaliation. A few of the board members looked like they'd seen ghosts. By the end of her presentation, one board member, a respected Latina judge named Rosa Meza, spoke first. Effective immediately, Judge Meza declared, I am moving to place Officer Keaton on indefinite suspension pending full investigation. And I am also moving that the board reconsider Dr. Roberts' position, not as a liability, but as the only person here who's been doing their job. Applause erupted. It wasn't just the room. The hallway beyond, filled with activists, reporters, and city staff, had heard every word. Beale muttered something about needing to consult legal counsel, but no one was listening to him anymore. That night, the headlines blazed. Dr. Nia Roberts vindicated, Whistleblower exposes corruption in internal affairs. Board members under scrutiny after oversight cover-up unfolds. But the true climax came not in a courtroom, nor on the evening news, but in a small, quiet church on the east side of the city. It was a community gathering Nia had been invited to, not to speak, but to simply be among her people. Elders hugged her. Mothers cried. Young girls looked at her like she was more than a lawyer, like she was a lighthouse. Reverend Samuels, a gentle giant of a man with a thunderous voice, stepped up to the pulpit. "Sister Roberts," he said, "you showed them that our silence is not their shield, that when you stand in truth, you shake the lies loose from their foundations." He motioned for her to come up. The room stood. As she took the microphone, Nia felt something deeper than vindication. She felt legacy. "I did what I had to do," she said softly. "Not because I wasn't scared. I am. But I did it because someone needed to believe the truth mattered more than the titles used to bury it." She scanned the room. Dozens of faces filled with hope, pride, and perhaps a spark of courage they didn't know they had. "I was told to sit down. I stood up. I was told to shut up. I spoke louder. I was told I'd lose everything. But I discovered something greater, that when you stand in your truth, what you gain can never be taken away." She stepped down to embrace a young woman in tears. And then, for the first time in months, Nia smiled. Not the careful, public smile of someone trying to survive in a hostile system, but the full, unguarded smile of someone who won. But victory never comes without consequence. Later that week, anonymous files were leaked to the press showing a pattern of obstruction among board members. Resignations followed. The mayor publicly thanked Nia and proposed new policies ensuring community oversight committees included civilian voices with real authority. And as for Officer Keaton, he was indicted on charges of misconduct and obstruction. He tried to plead down. It didn't work. Nia sat in the courtroom during his arraignment, not as a victim, not even as an accuser, but as a reminder, visible, present, and unshaken. As he was let out in cuffs, their eyes met briefly. His were hollow. Hers were calm. Outside, a group of students waited with signs that read, "We stand with Nia. Justice has a new name." This is what accountability looks like.